Sure, Charles. Thank you for having me here. A very good evening to you all. My name is Janani Chandran, and I work as a senior product and project manager at Rakuten Asia. So you might be wondering, what do we do at Rakuten? We are an e-commerce company. We are Japan's #1 e-commerce company. And what do I do there as a product manager? I am the product owner of a couple of ad products, advertisement products. So we bring in revenue through our advertisement business. Now that's all about me. I'm a person who loves urban farming. I'm an urban farmer. I also love maths. So I think there is something to do with logics, connections, and that's why I'm a product manager. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much, Janani, for the quick introduction. Maybe Qingzhe next.
Hi, hope everyone's. Wait, what's this? Oh, okay. Sorry. Zoom tends to ping me with funny things all the time. So I'm Qingzhe. I work at Tribe. So Tribe is an ecosystem builder for blockchain ecosystems, such as you might have heard of Polkadot, or maybe Zilliqa, some of the local chains. What I do as the head of product is that I help with the design and creation of these programs. But also Tribe recently launched a new web product called StackUp. And what we do at StackUp is that it's a learn and earn platform where developers are essentially rewarded for doing quests and for learning and getting things done. So I've been at Tribe for about 2.5 years. I joined right after college. Yeah, so my experience is kind of unique because I come from a background where it's the blockchain space, something that has been quite hot recently. But I joined it because I do enjoy sort of the philosophy of Web3 and what the kind of world that we're hoping to build. Fun fact, right? I think the last one. Yeah. So I'm not sure if it's fun or not. I don't know. But I think this year I'm traveling quite a fair bit. So like by the end of the year, I would have spent like, I think almost 6 months overseas. So I guess that's what happened when you work in a sort of like international organization. Yeah. That's me.
Thank you so much, Qingzhe. Maybe last but not least, let's have Rachel.
Hi everyone, good evening. I'm Rachel, and for me, I'm a product manager. I've worked I used to come from the banking finance industry, and then I pivoted to tech. I was doing quality assurance, and then I went to product management. So for me, I've worked mostly in like software as a service kind of products, some like B2B, some B2B2C. So for me, I think my journey also is considered a bit unusual for many other product managers as well. As you will learn, like product managers have very varied backgrounds. A fun fact about me, I really love photography, especially street photography. If you are on Instagram, my handle is Ruby Flames. But yeah, it's like I do shoot and post out, not as much nowadays, but I do try to shoot whenever I can. But yeah, I think photography also helps. It forces you to take on new perspectives. It forces you to sort of like, be observant and, be willing to speak with the subjects before taking the photos. And I think it kind of relates back to product management, where you have to communicate a lot with the stakeholders that you manage. So yeah, that's about me. Back to you, Charles.
Cool. Thanks, Rachel. I guess I found a new photography buddy. We can go for photo walks next time. Okay, thank you everyone for sharing such a great and wonderful self-introduction. For the next segment, we will dive right into like the facts versus myths about product management. So what I will do is I will share some of the questions that are from the signups that we have. And we will basically try to debunk some of the myths about product management, right? And then each one of you can share your experience about the statement, which I will share. So the very first statement is a very well-known one. A lot of people, they think that, PM is the mini CEO of the product. So just wanted to hear your opinions on this. Maybe Rachel, you can start first.
Well, okay. So I think it's like to break the statement down is to assume like what the CEO does in the company, and then after that assuming like the product manager's role. And I think as I've worked in various startups and I've seen and I've kind of like been hearing what the CEO does. I think a CEO actually does a lot more than what employees tend to see. CEOs in most startups are generally very much involved in helping to pitch the company to investors to get a buy-in and hopefully investment. But they also do help to be to make some decisions on behalf of the company with regards to like things like direction. And this direction kind of like generally trickles down to how other departments want to act on like the mission and vision of the company. So to say that a product manager is like mini CEO in the company is yes and no. Yes, in a way, is because the product manager is helping to sort of like in a way manage the development of a product portfolio that is under his care. So and this will also involve communicating with other folks who are involved one way or another with this portfolio. So these can be internal ones like colleagues who are in who are engineering, design, even like customer success, marketing, sales, finance. It can be external, which would involve things like your users and customers. Can be your vendors, can also potentially be investors, and sometimes you do have to interface with management to update them on the progress. So in a way, yes, it is, but I think the product manager also does a lot more than what a CEO does in terms of like more hands-on kind of work. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of where the similarities and differences lie.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing. So I guess on from Rachel's perspective, it's a bit of both, right? So on the yes side, the product manager will manage the development of the product portfolio, communicate with the various stakeholders, engineering, design, sales, and he or she will have to, sell the vision to these stakeholders. But on the other hand, as a product manager, you will also be focused on execution, and particularly at the junior level. Janani and Qingzhe, would you guys like to add on to this statement?
Well, I would like to add one main point here. As a product manager, you take accountability and ownership of your product. What is the vision? Where do you see yourself, after a few years? You take lots of other ownerships as well, which the CEO does as well. Imagine yourself as a startup CEO. So what do? Today, I do have an investment coming in. What do I see a vision for the next 1 year or the next 5 years? As a product manager, you do similar things. When you build a product from scratch, constantly thinking, which market do I launch in next? Where does my project go in? And there are at times, not all products are successful. You'd have heard of that as well. That's the same with our startup. As a CEO, he needs to worry about if something wrong happens, how do I re-emerge myself back? As a product manager, we need to be attentive on that details as well. Sometimes products fail. Can we relaunch our product? That's an important question that we need to question us. That's fine.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. Maybe we can harken a bit back to the origins of product management. Maybe that's how this sort of like concept came about, right? Like if you think a bit deeper, product management came about from the concept of brand man in P&G many years ago. I think that was like the 70s, where somebody would own the product life cycle and own, the entire framing or whatever it takes to make the product succeed. And I think it's that autonomy that other roles may lack, that some people might think that, okay, CEO, you get that level of autonomy. And so that might be why people think that, you become the CEO of the product from the perspective of like both owning and essentially having a bit more leeway than other roles, right? So maybe that's where it came about from. But also my guess is that I think when it comes to like jobs and careers, right, one thing I've noticed is that people tend to sort of believe in like ranks or career paths or hierarchies, and folks that do product, naturally try to fit yourself into some end state. Therefore, you're like, oh, if you're a product, maybe you are doing something that a CEO can do, so that next time you might be CEO. So there might be some way that people might be selling their career, and that also might be where like that misnomer might come about from. So I just want to like call it out a bit, and we can deliberate whether it's true or not, but that's my guess based on what I've been seeing so far.
Yep. Thank you so much, Qingzhe and Janani, for sharing. I do agree that if the audience here have done enough research on the role, you would actually realize that a lot of the articles, they would say that being a product manager equips you with the relevant skill sets to be a CEO. But ultimately, I think there are two very different roles. I mean, there are parallels in the sense that you will need to make big decisions, big bets. But ultimately, you don't necessarily have control over people like the engineers, the designers. You have to influence without authority, right? Yeah. So yeah, that's that. So with that, maybe we can move on to the next question. So we want to segue into the team, right? Like, what is the realities of product management? So maybe each one of you guys can share, like, what do you guys think is really product management? Is product management really at the intersection of UX, business, and tech? Yeah, maybe Qingse, you can start next.
Yeah, so that's sort of like a good way to frame it, because the success of a product means that it needs to be able to be financially viable. People need to be able to use it. And right now it's a technology space, right? Therefore, naturally you need to understand the technical underpinnings of it. But that's not necessarily true, right? Like a product skill set is something that can be applied to a lot of things. And I'm from SUTD, which I think Sean, one of the founders of Sage, will know that we place a strong emphasis on design. And actually, when you do product-related work, actually design is pretty important, because in the end, you design it for something with some end goal in mind, right? So you do need to figure out like some of these different parameters. I say that it's a good frame because UX, tech, and business are actually quite established fields, right? And that's something that you can use as a mental frame to learn or to dive a bit deeper in, so that you can dive or develop specific skill sets that you enjoy, or that you realize that you're good at, that kind of stuff. So that might be a good framing for you. But I think one thing you realize is that like all three of us here, we serve different kinds of products, right? Like I've had a friend who does product for Changi Airport, and he just manages APIs, right? I mean, not just, but like there's a lot of APIs that Changi Airport does, right? I mean, I do like programs, but sometimes I do like software related work. But in the end, a lot of it is really about how, as somebody who is sort of charged with driving the product, how do you bring together a team? And in the end, I think having a broad kind of perspective is helpful, because it helps a lot with hiring, right? Like when we first started our product and tried, in the end, we were like, hey, actually, we do need a good UX UI designer. And if you know nothing about UX, you cannot hire. So same as business, right? Like if you don't understand the basic underpinnings of like, at least be able to read an accounting financial statement. So like these things are kind of important. And of course, at least product became popularized, I think, recently or in the last few years because of the Google like VP program, I think, where they are essentially in charge of specific products. And so a lot of people are like, hey, this is super prestigious and you are in charge of product in Google. So therefore you need to know like how do you work with engineers. And sometimes that might require a certain level of technical understanding. If not, it's very difficult to earn the respect of people you work with, which I think is really key here, right? There was a book, I think, where like someone said, product managers bring the donuts, right? Okay, we do a lot of glue work, right? We make it easy for different teams to interface, because a very specialized UX person might not understand the limitations of like, I don't know, the latest React 7 or whatever. I don't even know what the number is now. And a business person might be like, hey, we need to do this or cut costs or something. Is it possible? And the tech guy is like, we have already fully optimized our stack, and then you got to communicate that, right? So that's why it's important to know these different things. If not, then it will be very difficult for you to understand in a somewhat, I wouldn't say adversarial, but like constantly changing, or as SMU folks call it, VUCA environment. How do you sort of keep your product alive? Yeah.
Thanks, Qingse, for sharing all your insights on what you think about that particular statement. Janani, you seem very inclined to share your opinions.
I totally understand and agree with it. As a product manager, you spend lots of your time communicating with people. It might not be just UI, UX, technology, or the business. There are people who might be even talking to the market research team. There might be people talking into a specialized group of testers because they are the ones going to test your product before it gets launched into the market. So I see that product manager is like an interface between different teams. And as Gizet said, there are lots of hats that we have to wear. Certain times we are the people who need to explain it as a summary to the business on why a particular requirement cannot be developed. Probably the tech stack doesn't allow us, or it might be an outdated one, or if you develop it that way, there's no future to it. So I think a product manager sits in a role where he or she needs to understand everything and still comprehend it into a simpler words that people can understand. So I see a product manager as a great communicator and a great negotiator as well. Certain times you need to negotiate between different things, different teams. You cannot deliver everything at the same time. So you should know what works when.
Yeah, agreed. 100% agreed on this point. I think good product managers know when to push back, when to say no to feature requests, and a great product manager wouldn't just say yes to all the
Plating requests as well at certain times. A good product manager should know where to say no.
Agreed. Rachel, maybe you want to share more about your experience working across all the different sectors who you work with.
Well, okay, so it's like I've worked in like SaaS companies, but they span multiple industries. So I think like what Qingzhe and Janani have like shared, it's really about I think saying that product management is in the intersection of UX, business, and tech is true. There's sometimes maybe the additional context that is industry specific, which may not fall directly into business, because business, to me, business is very much like sales, marketing, and to a certain extent customer success, but it does not always include roles that are specific to the industry that the company's in. And so sometimes having the additional context is also important, and the product manager needs to have not necessarily like the same level as the specialists or the experts in these fields, but they do need to have a level of understanding which in my opinion, pardon the language, they cannot bullshit you about, but you don't need to be an expert like them. Like, you are not paid to do every department's job. Every department is paid to do the job. Your job is to help to in a way like coordinate, and in a way like like what Joanne say, like know when to push back, know when to like accept. Sometimes I think of myself as a product manager. I think of myself as the control tower of an airport, where you have to you have to tell different people direct where the different planes go. You kind of you're able to see the schedules, but you're also able to avoid any conflicts in terms of schedules, whatnot. So and in a way, it's like you're helping to make some sense of the chaos that is happening in the company, where all the different departments are worried about their own scope of things, but they may not understand how it impacts others. So I think we as product managers, we are there to help to make some sense of the chaos, within the company, and also the chaos that's happening outside the company as well, to a certain extent, like understanding the market, understanding the users and the customers. So yeah, yeah.
Yep, thanks so much for sharing. I do 100% agree with you. We need to make sense out of chaos, and a lot of times we have to find out more about the data itself and how we can best move the needle, right? Yeah, so 100% agree with you on that point. For my very last question about facts versus myths in product management, I was very curious to find out from all your personal stories, what is the harsh truth and reality of being a product manager? Maybe Rachel, you can start first.
Oh wow, okay. I think in product management, right, I think it's going to be very difficult to pacify everyone. I think no matter what decision you do, there's going to be at least one party that's going to be upset. And I think that's going to be very, very normal. And I've experienced it a lot of times in the course of my work. If I make a decision, it might make the product development team that I'm helping to manage happy, but it's going to make the higher management team or even the investors not necessarily the happiest. Sometimes, you know, if certain like decisions come in, it may disrupt, say, like the product roadmap, which you may have like plans for like many quarters before, and this would not make like the development team very happy, because I think a lot of the times the development team does like to have some sort of like structure and some sort of something more definite, and like sometimes having too much movement, it does make them not too happy. So I think as a product manager, that's something that I've realized is very hard, is to manage expectations of different stakeholders.
Thank you so much for sharing. Xingzhe, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so just thinking, questions about harsh truths, is it?
Yeah, the harsh realities of being a product manager.
I guess it depends, right? Like for someone who's new to your job, I guess just discovering that reality is harsh is just enough, right? Like some people will be like, oh, actually, this is a lot more work than I thought. I guess it really depends on what kind of product you're working on. But in general, one key aspect is learning maybe like that your actions have second order effects, right? And learning to live with it is kind of important. Sometimes you might, go down like a complete rabbit hole that might be completely wrong. And learning how to own up to that might also be something important that you need to learn. It's not like you can just roll back code, right? Like, I mean, you can, but you can't roll back time, and you also can't roll back effort. So that's something pretty important. Along the way, I suppose, when you work on different products, your clients might not like it, right? You have to deal with that, right? And I guess reporting directly to the CEO generally means that also you have to deal with him or her. Yeah. So that might be stressful for some. And so I think that's why generally there's like a role before product manager, right? As an associate product manager or something, you sort of learn the ropes so that you don't have to be directly responsible for some of these things, but at least learn the cadence of it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I do 100% agree with you. I think most product managers, they make, well, as I mentioned, they make gambles, they make decisions, which may or may not be correct. And ultimately, we are also not the like subject matter experts when it comes to technical implementation, marketing, and all that kind of stuff. And yet, when we make the decisions, we need to take into account the stakeholders, the impact on the stakeholders. And if we do make a mistake, we have to be accountable for it. Yeah. Janani, would you like to share more about your viewpoint?
I agree with both their points. I would add one more point here. See, as a product manager, you don't own a team. That is a limitation that you have. You are still dependent on a development team. You still go to a tech lead and ask him, boss, is this possible? Is this possible for a launch date? Is it technically possible? So you are dependent on a technical team and a project manager for your execution. So, and certainly there are some people, in their early stages of career or mid stages, they do have this question: do I continue with a product management career, or should I go into a technical ladder? Because the person might have ambitions to become a team manager, would like to be a people manager. Certain points that might not work. While you are a product manager, you are not a technical expert. So you might not be able to become a team manager. You should be aware of that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I 100% agree with you. And it goes back to the previous point on, influence without authority, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, we are done with this segment on, facts versus myths. And I would like to change gears because a lot of our audience here today, they are either, current undergraduate students or they are early career professionals. So just now when, Janani joined the room, she was like, if you guys have any questions about how you guys can break into product management, feel free to ask me. So I will just start with asking Janani, right? So especially...
Oh, you should ask me why. I started my career as a software engineer. I moved into build and release management. Then I also tried hands-on into QA. I was a QA lead for some time. And then, I was I'm like the curious kid. So I tried, why not I try? So someone had told me, with your excellent communication skills and stakeholder management skills, what are you doing in QA? Why are you not a project manager? So I thought, okay, I think project management would suit me better. So I did my PMP and I tried hands-on into project management. It's quite successful, quite good. Then I also became a regional program manager. I was with Chubb. And then I had this desire in me. I should manage a product. A product management was something I wanted to do. So I did a foray. That was like a game changer. I tried my hands on into product management, and that is something I've been loving for the last 7, 8 years. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's interesting because I mean Rachel also did QA previously. But anyway, back to the question. We wanted to ask about, like, given the current economic climate, right?
Right.
How should fresh graduates navigate and secure a PM career for themselves? Like, what types of projects should they put on their resume when applying for a PM role? And I think leading on to your story earlier, you mentioned great communication skills. So, like, what are the key traits required?
Mindset. See, product manager, I don't think there is a particular course. If you want to be a project manager, there is a course like, you need to have your PMP and stuff like that. For a product manager, I don't think there are any particular courses or certifications that's needed. But however, I would say that you need to be a curious person. You need to be an innovator, and you need to think yourself as a problem solver. How many of us look at into the apps that we use constantly and say that, this would have been better if it had a button here? Example is, now let's consider the case of Netflix. While I watch Netflix and see those recommendations, right, sometimes I'm not happy. Why doesn't Netflix have a better way to see what my persona is and rather give me some recommendations based on that? Why doesn't it give me the exact match of a content? So when I think in that way, I become already a product manager because I'm exploring more. You should have this curiosity. How, why, when? Ask yourself these questions. If I were to redesign an app, how it would be? These kind of questions you need to foray and try to understand the market in a better way. If you want to join into a company, something like, we'll talk about a social media app. How savvy are you? Are you one of those people who uses a social media app? If yes, do you love it? Do you enjoy it? Yes. What is that you think would be the next level of it? Explore all these kind of questions before you prepare yourself for a product management career. You should also be a person who loves to work with different people. It's not just tech, it's not just business or UI. Do you interact being with other product minded people? You could have that ability to go and have a conversation. Okay, what's up at your end? Guys, you might not believe we see Grab as an app, but there might be hundreds of product managers behind it. Facebook as a single app. I know that notifications itself might have 3 or 4 different product managers, one handling the front end, one handling the API or the batches, and so on. So you should really love something that you do, only then foray into product management.
That's so true. I think all product managers need to be great problem solvers and to have, that intrinsic curiosity about how they could better solve the problems. Yeah. Qingze and Rachel, any one of you guys want to go next? Okay, I'm just going to ask Qingze. Maybe you can start.
You reframe the question again. What exactly is the
Yeah.
question?
Okay, so I think particularly for you, right? You broke into product management right out of college, right? So we were actually curious to find out, given the whole economic climate right now, how could fresh graduates navigate the situation and secure a PM career for themselves? Like, maybe what do you put on your resume? What were some traits that you exhibited during your interviews, so on and so forth? Yeah.
Right. So generally, I'm not a good example in this case because I've had quite a unique journey. But maybe just very quick advice, right? The economic climate ever since 2008 has always been at the brink of recession or in outright recession or in COVID or war or like some non-stop thing. So don't let that hold you back. I've seen some of my friends get lowballed and they pick on some job that, that they are lowballed because they think that, oh, COVID, I can't find a job, which is not true, right? In fact, I think during COVID, a lot of people changed jobs. A lot of people found new careers. So my first piece of feedback, I guess, is to not let that restrict you because you've sort of framed the question that way, right? So I need to start first. Um, and I think if you want to do product management, you must like products. So you have to be very curious about like what makes a good product a good product. So don't be too enraptured by the career or by the pathway or by the title or by, I know there's this book about how to get into product management or something, or how to crack the PM interview. Yeah, I remember now. Yeah, like people tend to follow what's happening here and there. I mean, it's a good reference, but ultimately it's better to work for a company that has a product you care about than to be a product manager working on a product you don't care about. Like, I think that's much, much more important. And therefore, how to break into that job. I mean, for me, I've always been doing like community related work, education related work, blockchain related work. So literally how I got my job was I knew my boss at that time because I was working with IMDA for like some student related stuff. And then he knew me as the person to talk to when it comes to engaging student leaders on blockchain. So one day I get a call and then I hop on and I'm on a call with like one of his clients. And then he wants to engage students and I show him what I'm doing. And at the end of the call, he's like, do you want to just join Tribe? Right. So all of that resume stuff doesn't matter. I have not submitted a resume in my life yet. So it's kind of different and you should not close yourself to this possibility, right? Especially in a space that I'm in, like in blockchain and Web3. I mean, if you use the product and you give good feedback, you ping the CEO on Twitter, like Alex Varnovich, he literally just said like, hey, you know, do you guys want extra followers? I'll retweet everybody that uses Nonsen. His product, his company is called Nonsen. To Singaporeans, it's pronounced Nansen, but you know, he's a Nordic guy. So, right, there are different ways to eventually get into the product field, but ultimately, for me, I believe, you know, this is really just one phase of the career, and working on a course or an idea that you care about matters a lot more, and it will show. It will show in that initial coffee chat you have with the CEO. It will show when you are like talking about the product you're working on. It will show. Yeah, and I will even care about your resume. Yeah, when I hire, I don't look at resumes actually. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tingza, for sharing. And I think it's such great advice, you know, to be open-minded, especially in the current economic climate. I think beyond product management, like breaking into product management, like it's generally good advice to continuously network, build your relationships, and to find you know, your intrinsic motivation when you want to build a product. And interestingly enough, I do have that book called Cracking the PM Interview. But as mentioned by Tingza, is not particularly useful. It's just a good frame of reference. Yeah. Rachel, you want to end off this segment and then we will actually go on to getting the questions from the floor. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if I should say this. So for me it's like I don't know. I've spoken with quite a few people who are in like product. And also I think after having been in product myself, I think what I hear is that product management is generally like you need to be able to see like a very macro view of the product and being able to understand the moving parts that make the product, whether they are the actual code or the design or even like the other functions that contribute to it. And so something that I've come to realize that having a PM career is something to aspire towards too, but it might not necessarily be the best first job straight out of school. Why do I say that? It's because I think if you want to have a better understanding of how a product works, not just in terms of like the product management, like, you know, what the product manager does, you have to liaise with different departments. Like as mentioned earlier, it's in the intersection of like design, tech and business. And advice that I tend to give people is that you should probably start off somewhere in one of these verticals first, and maybe like work there for a while, and then while you're working there, observe how how the team operates. If you are working in a team that's product oriented and has like a product manager, observe how the product manager works. So for me, what happened was I did a career in banking finance and I pivoted to tech. My first couple of jobs were in quality assurance, and then my second job, I actually I was in a more structured company where I could see, like, that what UX designer does, what product manager, product owner, project manager, business analyst, what do they do? And for me, I was quite fascinated by what the product owner, what the product managers are doing. And so I just asked them, can I understudy you? So what understudying means is kind of like doing a mini internship within your job. And so what I did was about 75% of the time, I was doing my day job as the quality assurance person. But the other 25% of the time, I understudied the product owner. And I just helped them, work on like a new feature that was in the same product that I was working on. And so it's something that I got to have a bit of like hands-on learning, being somewhat of like an apprentice to the product owner who was managing the project that I was on. And so I think that helps to provide a bit more, like much better context, not just in terms of the technical point, but also like where a product manager kind of like sits in relation to the other departments, in relation to how the company itself operates. And so to me, I think that having it as like a medium to long-term career goal is better than having it as a more short-term career goal, in my opinion, because other functions help to build a foundation to become a much more empathetic kind of like product manager, and also helps in a way with the knowledge that you need to liaise with the different stakeholders as well.
Thank you so much for sharing, Rachel. I do think that it does help especially when it comes to gathering context. Especially when you try to write out your requirements, you have a better understanding and foundation. And I think it particularly applies when it's a technical task that you are trying to write requirements for. The time now is 8:46. So right now we will move on to the to getting the panelists to answer questions from the floor. So to the panelists, for the next segment, feel free to just jump in and answer the questions. We don't really need to have everyone answer the question due to the time constraints. So to the audience, you can scan the QR code and then you can submit your questions. Oh, yeah. I think the link is also sent in the chat, by the way. Okay, let's get started with the Mentimeter. Okay, the very first question that we have is, what are some of your biggest shocks that you have that you faced when you first became a PM? I think this is quite relevant to the question that we had asked earlier about harsh realities. But perhaps any of the panelists, you guys can chime in and share about a story that you guys might have had when you had first became a PM. Yeah.
I think I'll take it. For me, it was a very big shock. The first thing is convincing all stakeholders to a common point. Okay, that was the biggest shock. To me, I was under the misconception that as a product manager, when you come forward and propose 2-3 ideas, we give this option of option 1, 2, and 3, and it would be smooth. The stakeholders would say, okay, pros and cons of both, done with option 2. It doesn't happen. The agreements and the disagreements continue. And often you see that even the 3 options that you have prepared might not be enough. Bringing all your stakeholders agree on a single point might be very difficult. So that was a big shock that I have.
Okay, maybe I can go next. I think for me, one of the biggest shocks was kind of like how varied the workload of a PM is. So I think it's like, even when I was understudying the product owner, I also did not like fully realize the extent of what the product manager does until I went into product management full time. And it's like, it's not just like you end up going into a lot more meetings than like any other job I've been to. And sometimes the only time you can actually do your real work is really after office hours when you don't have meetings. And that's where you can do like actual product management work. But I think, yeah, it's like, I think being like communicating with people is a huge part of the job, but also there are many other parts of the job, like planning what the development team does, and also like in general, like I think it's like there's a lot more that comes to the product management job, and even like different companies have some slightly different variations of what the job entails, because I think product management as a job is relatively new compared to many other like job functions there are. So yeah, I think different companies would probably give you different things to do as a product manager.
I see Qingzhe is deeply in thought. You thinking of a
I'm not
story?
sure. Like, I think there's a lot of small shots, right? Like when you start taking on responsibility, there is emergent complexity, right? Things have second order effects, third order effects, you're not really sure. Biggest, I don't know. I mean, Web3, right? Like the blockchain space. When you talk to other product managers, maybe, when you're at a peak of a bull market, I guess one of my biggest shocks is like you realize that a lot of folks don't really actually manage a product, and they are more like marketing instead. And then it's something that you got to figure out, right? Like be able to suss out whether this is a product person or a product marketing person. Like that can be a bit of a challenge. And especially when you're in an industry with like hype and a lot of exuberance. Sometimes, because Tribe also does an accelerator, and you look at different companies and their products and stuff. Some of them don't really actually make sense. So that's something that I think you will learn. And putting it gently, I guess, is another challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, must be challenging to grow as a product manager. Anyway, let's go into quick fire mode, because we have time constraints and we have plenty of questions to go through. So maybe can click this one as answered, and then we can head on to the next question. Yeah, I think the next question would be more maybe more tailored for Janani, because Janani does project and product management.
Planning to take it up as well. See, I would differentiate them into two different mindsets. We'll call it as the project mindset and the product mindset for today. So when I talk about a product mindset, I'm more concerned about what and why. So I would look at a problem. I need to fix this problem. Why is this problem going to be addressed? That is my mindset that I'm going to look at. Okay. And I would also, as a product manager, worry about what is the market share, or what are the current trends? What do I need to do? And such kind of questions. But when I talk about a project management, guys, he's not going to think about the product's roadmap or what happens next. He's going to think it as a small project. So he'll worry about how and when. What are my milestones? What is that I'm going to deliver? And once that is completed, my task is over. At this point, he doesn't even worry about a long-term roadmap or a short-term roadmap. So project manager is an executor, while a product manager is a dreamer and the person who comes with a vision and a mission. Simpler terms. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I do agree about the point on how the product manager is like a dreamer. You try to make science fiction into reality, right?
Yeah.
And project managers care more about the when, like when is this going to be delivered, so on and so forth.
This topic of project and product, I think we'll take it as a 1-hour session sometime soon. I'll be happy to.
Yeah, Chiwa, I think we can organize another fireside chat for this. Okay, maybe the next question. Yeah, okay, this question is an interesting one. So essentially, as a product manager, you have you need to have knowledge on all the various scopes under you, but you also cannot and you shouldn't micromanage. So how do you actually decide for yourself and say that, I have enough knowledge to function as a product manager, and you can say to yourself that, I'm ready to take on a product management role. Yeah. Yeah, fastest fingers.
I don't think you're ever ready. I don't think there's such a thing as like 100% ready. I think it's like I'm not sure whether you all have heard of the T-shaped engineer, where you have there's essentially the T, right? So the horizontal one is the breadth, and the T, or like the vertical part, is kind of like the depth, right? So sometimes they are referred to as like a table where they have like multiple legs, and there's the top, right? So I think this so-called table of knowledge is going to be ever growing as a product manager, and I don't think that there's something as there's a fixed shape of this so-called like table as a product, or knowledge table as a product manager before you can become a product manager. I think I think every product manager's knowledge table makeup is very different, and even like for product managers, there would be some who are specialized in different things. As mentioned earlier, some of them are like product marketing managers who are more marketing inclined. There's technical product managers who are more engineering focused. Some product managers are a bit more like user experience design kind of focused. So I don't think that is a very specific definite way to say I have enough to function as a PM. I think that it really varies, and also depends on what you want to specialize in.
Yep, thanks for sharing, Rachel, and I do agree. Ultimately, I think, especially as a fresh graduate, you just have to take the leap of faith, to believe that you have what it takes to be a product manager. And it also boils down to your willingness to admit that sometimes you will be wrong as a product manager. You need to exhibit that innate curiosity to learn, as what Janani mentioned previously. It's 8:56. I think we can handle one very last question. This question that I have chosen is quite interesting. So what do you all keep in mind when handling different personalities? Okay, I think I chose the question is too hard.
No, that's okay. let's answer that. See, guys, I'm also a people manager, so we deal with different personalities. We call it as the disc profiling or things. Let's not go into that. But trust me, stakeholder management or keeping your stakeholders happy is one of the tasks that you need to be good at. Okay. First thing is try to understand from their perspective. Certain times I see that the business might not agree to the proposals that I make. So now, what are the things I need to keep in mind? First and foremost is I need to try to understand is why is the business telling that this might not be a feasible solution. So you will need to see that all of our end goal is the same. Just the routes might be different how you go to the end goal, isn't it? You'll have to see it that way. First and foremost, don't take it too personal. That's the advice I give you. You will have to think from a product's perspective, or how does this have an impact on your product? Now, example is design A versus design B, or testing out which solution is better. While you come across, you might meet different kinds of people. All you need to do is look at solutioning. What is the good and bad of why is the stakeholder not agreeing to my solution? Probably try to understand from their perspective and their mindset. You might be able to get that.
Yep, 100% agree. I think, as what Janani mentioned, right, most times when handling different personalities, I think it's important to acknowledge that it's not a situation where it's us versus them. We are all one team, and we're all trying to achieve the same goal. And so it's important for us to build alliances, to build trust and relationships across teams. And that's also one of the the key responsibility of a product manager, right? Cross-functional
yes. And
leadership.
just not to forget, as a product manager, you should have some access to data. You should have, if you are going and presenting something, guys, the best weapon that you have is a data.
don't speak without having the required data in your hand. So that is also a key skill set. You should be able to support it as an evidence. You should know which stakeholder likes which kind of data. So you should be able to present and give evidence on what is the background behind me coming up with this idea.
Thank you so much, Janani. And with that, I think we have come to the end of our fireside chat. So big thank you from Sage to Janani, Rachel, Qingze for all your insightful sharing today. I believe most of everyone here on the fireside chat, all of the students, they have gained invaluable amount of knowledge as to how they should navigate their careers moving into product management. So big thanks. I believe we still have quite a number of questions, but I think our speakers would be more than willing to connect with you guys on LinkedIn if you would prefer to reach out over there. Yeah. Yeah, and that's all from us.